If we're looking at what the Neo Egoist League arc represents in Blue Lock's overarching structure, it's a moment of transition, a rite of passage where our cast of amateur high schoolers gets initiated into the world of professional footballers. The arc serves as a point of no return, with the Blue Lockers on the cusp of securing an offer from a world-class team and embarking on a salaried athletic career. And what I want to highlight in my first full analysis of the NEL as a whole is that the manga highlights this arc's status as a liminal period in which its cast makes the transition from amateurs to professionals through a persistent interest in the contrast between childhood and adolescence. To put it differently, one of the central underlying metaphors of the NEL is that succeeding in Blue Lock's second phase is like a child growing into an adult. And so, the major conflicts of the arc revolve around various characters who are struggling to make this very transition, around players who are trapped in an eternal childhood, and adults who have lost touch with their inner child. These are the stakes that the arc establishes for its major characters. For Blue Lock's egoists to launch a professional career, they must make a successful figurative transition to adulthood, with the many complications that this process entails. Hello, my name is Sean, and man, I seriously thought this would just be another regular 20-minute video. Boy, was I wrong. But before I proceed, I want to bring up something else. I've recently hit 2,000 subscribers. Absolute madness, really, that there are so many of yous who are interested in someone picking apart a football comic in ludicrous levels of detail. And that's gotten me thinking about ways to invest further into the channel. You might have clicked onto this video because of the gorgeous thumbnail, which is one of the many phenomenal pieces of art I've commissioned the past year for my informal channel artist and absolute legend Siyorix. Now, the reality is, I've only so much money to spend on the channel, and getting custom artwork for every single video isn't financially feasible for me at the moment. Also, if I can talk about some crazy pipe dreams, I'd love to have my videos edited professionally. Your viewing experience would get a lot better, and it'd be wonderful for myself to free up some more time for my second channel, or just to catch my breath a bit more in general. So, let me get to the point. If you enjoy what I do, would like to help me grow the channel even further, and want to support some amazing artists in the community, I've started a Patreon page. Of course, I'm not expecting you to chip in and get nothing in return. For €5 a month, or $5 if you're from a nation that takes its socio-economic hegemony for granted, you can join my unpolished gem tier and get a weekly podcast with my first thoughts on the new Blue Lock chapter and updates on my upcoming projects every Tuesday or Wednesday. Or, if you're feeling really generous, you can join the €10 Diamond in the Rough tier, and I'll shout out your username at the end of every video as well. Also, realize that even small amounts make a big difference. If I get just 10 patrons, I can make custom artwork for every video a reality. Also, if you're on the fence, you can get a free trial for 7 days at any time and see if the podcast is worth your while. Anyways, back to the topic at hand. As I've already noted, the NEL is from its onset cast as the Blue Lockers' initiation into the realm of professional football. After growing into fully fledged chicks, Jinpachi Ego asks them to spread their wings and fly into the wide world. And notably, the NEL introduces a new dynamic into the mix with its master strikers, who serve as quasi-parental figures to guide the Blue Lock candidates through this rite of initiation. I know this might sound like a bit of a stretch, but have a look at the first major moment of characterization for one of the master strikers. Kaiser has just taunted the newcomers and tried to enforce a hierarchy of sorts by hazing Isagi. But right then, Noah reprimands Kaiser and calls out his childish behavior. And when the upcoming star tries to talk back, Noah will have none of it. he asserts himself as the unquestioned authority of Bastard München, the patriarch who doesn't engage with Kaiser as an equal. So in other words, if Kaiser is equated to a child from his very first introduction, and that's rather poignant with the benefit of hindsight, Noah is effectively cast as the team's father figure. We see a similar dynamic at play with some of the other Master Strikers as well. In his introductory speech, Chris Prince recounts how the Blue Lock candidates hold the same misguided beliefs as he did back when he was young. So in other words, Prince sees a clear delineation between the mindsets of youthful amateurs and adult professionals, and he aims to guide his protégés along the thorny road of professionalism. This is made even more explicit in the case of Mark Snuffy, whose initial speech offers remarkable parallels to that of Prince. When Snuffy asks his Blue Lockers what football means to them, he confronts them with their naive, childlike responses. For Snuffy, being a pro means that you have to treat football as a job, that you have to enter the world of bona fide adults with bills to pay and other responsibilities. In fact, his team is one that explicitly mimics corporate structures and treats all aspects of football as business transactions. So with that, the newcomers have been unwittingly catapulted into the world of adults, where they must absorb all there is to know about operating in a professional environment. I'll park Snuffy's character for now because I'll have a lot more to say about him later in the video. But first, I want to have a look at how the process of maturing unfolds among the Blue Lock candidates. And for that, it's really significant which character is the first to adapt to their new environment. In the opening contest of the arc, the match contrasts protagonist Yoichi Isagi's inability to secure a spot on the starting lineup to the new and improved Meguru Bachira. And the choice for Bachira here is no coincidence. After all, he's the one most strongly associated with childhood in the earlier parts of the story. More specifically, Bachira's greatest moment of growth in the series involves him reconnecting with his inner child. In fact, the entire concept of what's known in the fandom as an original ego was first introduced in the 4v4. And I want to interrogate this notion for a moment, because the concept is going to be highly important for the remainder of this video. What Bachira's backstory suggests is that one's childhood offers a unique window into your psyche because this is the only period in your life before your underlying nature is repressed by cultural forces. This causes most people to lose touch with their childlike passions and thereby compromise on their innermost desires. Their original ego, if you will. So what Bachira's developments in the second selection show us is that you can achieve better results by aligning your plays with the impulses that manifest during childhood. But now, in the Barcha match, we're shown that Bachira has actually matured in his approach. Here, Isagi observes a change in Bachira from his former childlike playstyle. He's derived a more mature, calculated approach from his master's teachings, one that lets him leverage his strengths to their greatest potential. And this is explicitly presented as Bachira's transition from child to adult. And what's really significant from this perspective is that his new mentor actually encourages him to draw on the embodiment of his inner child to reach his full adult potential. It's no coincidence then that Bachira receives the honor of being the first to score in the entire NEL. Bachira essentially serves as a blueprint for making a healthy transition into adulthood, one where you learn to flourish in a professional environment without losing touch with your inner monster. So when we watch the struggles of the rest of the Blue Lock cast as they navigate their own coming-of-age stories, we're constantly invited to use Bachira as a yardstick of sorts to gauge their progress. And that's why you'll find me making a lot of references back to Bachira throughout this video. So let's now proceed to Isagi's second shonen in the arc. If the Bachira match contrasts Bachira's ability to successfully integrate into an adult environment with Isagi failing to do just that, the Manshine match is all about showing the different paths our Blue Lock candidates take to reach the next stage. This is especially highlighted by how the manga frames the main striker on the rivaling team. Nagi's ignorance about football makes him like an unfledged chick who's being raised to become a world-class striker. And as Isagi explicitly compares his own state at the start of the match with that of Nagi, the manga suggests that whoever comes out on top between the two of them will have made a very meaningful stride on his journey towards adulthood. But if we're talking about characters who are equated to children, I have to touch on the player who serves as Isagi's main point of contrast throughout the match. The central concerns of the Manshine match are established in the quarrel between Isagi and Yukimiya, which then segues into Yukimiya's backstory. But before I dive into Yukimiya specifically, I want to say something about backstories in the NEL more generally. I made a video last year about the narrative implications of Blue Lock's backstories, most of which was focused on tendencies I observed in the character backstories from the first few selections up to the U20 match. What I basically argued was that all of these in some way, shape or form highlight how Japan's football culture is failing its most promising talents. I noted that these priorities seem to have changed with the NEL, but at the time I didn't quite know what to make of this. But now that we've reached the latter half of the PXG match, I've started to connect the dots. To put it simply, most every backstory in the NEL focuses on the various characters' early childhoods and the impact of these experiences on their coming-of-age process. Each of them has faced circumstances that hamper their transition into adulthood, and so, by implication, threaten their ability to successfully complete the rite of passage that is the NEL. We were already given the first glimpses of these concepts with Yukimiya in the Manshine match, although in all fairness he's a bit of an exception to the rule that the NEL focus on our cast's early childhood. Kenya Yukimiya stood at the brink of adulthood, with a successful football career not far out of his grasp, but right then he fell victim to an eyesight condition that threatened to put going pro out of reach. So in other words, Yukimiya witnessed a divergence between the concepts of growing up and securing a professional career that, according to one of the arc's key metaphors, are supposed to go hand in hand. For him specifically, becoming an adult means going blind, and so he desperately resists the process of growing up to this point. The consequences of his condition are very meaningfully reflected in his behaviour on the field as well. Yukimiya pulls off a desperate attack, and when Isagi asks him to bury the hatchet and elect a more rational course of action, Yukimiya flat out refuses. The underlying issue for him is accepting Isagi's path as the only viable path. But note Isagi's response here. He chastises his teammate for his childish thoughts. Isagi's response gains even more in significance if we think of the arc's overall narrative structure. As I noted earlier, the NEL sees the Blue Lock candidates entrusted to a master striker, a surrogate parent figure of sorts who offers his children a new philosophy that will nurture them into mature adults. So when Yukimiya rejects Isagi's rational approach, he's effectively refusing the core teachings that his master presented him as a means to grow up. And that's why he runs into his limits as long as he resorts to childlike behavior. Yet, the very notion that Isagi is the adult and Yukimiya the child is flipped on its head at the end of the match. I've discussed this at length in my recent Manshine analysis, but in the match's final moments, Isagi's beliefs are proven wrong by Yukimiya. Basically, even though Isagi's abilities have improved by leaps and bounds, he still hasn't fully come into his own. And that's underscored by Isagi collapsing from fatigue at the end of the match. As Kaiser notes, he acted like a kid who doesn't know his limits. So on a meta level, we're reminded that Isagi also has a lot of growing up to do before he can call himself a true professional. That brings us to the Ubers match, which is the part of the arc that's most overtly concerned with questions of growing up. This is flagged as early as the build-up towards the match, with Hiori's backstory, which is the first backstory in the arc that is explicitly concerned with the impact of childhood experiences on the process of growing up. In a way, Hiori is painted as the polar opposite of Bachira. Due to his helicopter parents forcing their expectations upon their son, Hiori was effectively denied a real childhood, and that's reflected in his dislike for the sport. In other words, Hiori never developed desires of his own in his formative years that he could draw on later in life, like how Lavinio taught Bachira to use his inner monster as a guidepost for reaching adulthood. And what makes this even more interesting is that the rivaling team presents a counterpoint to Hiori in its early stages. Where the bastard player is a victim of toxic parenting, we see in Snuffy an absolute paragon of a surrogate father. Don Lorenzo was abandoned by his parents and lay at the brink of death, until Snuffy, in a gesture of pure altruism, granted the destitute boy a second chance at life. The Ubers master single-handedly offered Lorenzo a future, raising a former orphan into a world-class defender. So in other words, Snuffy has a proven track record of successfully guiding players through this rite of initiation that is the move from amateur to professional. And that's what makes the Italians such a potent threat to the German team. Yet all this seems to mask that the Ubers match offers in Mark Snuffy by far the most complex take on the arc's concern with coming of age. I actually put out a dedicated video on this storyline, so if you want to hear my extended thoughts, I'd highly recommend checking that out at some point as well. But to put it succinctly, Snuffy's initial speech that football is not a calling but a job gives the impression that the Italian master is the ideal mentor figure for the purposes of the NEL. But then, as the manga peels back the layers of Snuffy's character, it unveils that Snuffy himself failed to make a healthy transition into this figurative adulthood, and his teachings about professionalism are nothing but a facade to hide the deep scars from losing his best friends. Back in his glory days, he and Mick proclaimed that they'd never become the kind of boring adults who'd give up on their dreams. To put it in terms of the Bachira model, Mick refused to stop hearing the voice of his inner monster. Unfortunately, the pair is forced to learn the hard way that you simply can't remain a child once you advance into the world of professionals. And when confronted with this ironclad wall, each of them offers an opposite response. One of them compromises and forces himself to grow up. The other remains an obstinate child until his final breath. And the tragedy of these two players is that both of them die in the process, either figuratively or for real. So, to put it simply, Snuffy was right in identifying that they needed to scale the wall, but he never truly grasped how to properly make the leap. And that left him a failure of an adult who lost touch with his inner child. His isn't a path towards proper maturity, but rather a philosophy about purposelessly inching ever closer towards the inevitable grasp of death. That's perhaps also why his main protege, Lorenzo, is not a phoenix rising from the ashes, but rather a wandering corpse. And on the flip side, the match ultimately vindicates Mick in his belief that the grown-ups are never the ones to change the world. The flag bearers of the revolution will always be the shitty brats who defy conventional wisdom. And that's proven not just by Barrow, whose childish defiance brought about his second goal, but also by the story of Blue Lock as a whole. This is, after all, a tale about a ragtag band of adolescents who upend the established order to assumably win the World Cup. And that's why, in one of the greatest symbolic gestures of the entire manga, Snuffy needs to shove Noah to the side for Barrow to score. The future of Japanese football can only arise once the sensible adults have been pushed out of the picture. So in short, if the tragedy of Snuffy is that he made the right decision but lost his way in the process, the tragedy of Mick is that he had the vision to change the world but couldn't take the final step to see it through. And that's why, in what I consider the greatest moment in all of Blue Lock, Shohei Barrow eventually surpasses the both of them. And the reason for that is because Barrow has also experienced a figurative moment of death, and yet he clawed his way back to life, emerging rejuvenated and stronger than ever before. That, however, leads to a further question. Has Barrow, in his time with the Ubers, successfully undergone the rite of passage from child to adult? The answer, in my view, isn't clear-cut, and there's a lot of sinister foreshadowing that Barrow runs a serious risk of following in Mick's footsteps. Yet, I think that on the balance, he's actually proven himself worthy of overcoming the hurdle that is the NEL by succeeding where Snuffy and Mick failed. Barrow might be painted as the most uncompromising character in this series, but unlike Mick, he's learned that it's possible to change in order to stay the same. And unlike Snuffy, Barrow overcame adversity without abandoning the childlike desires that make you strive for greatness. So even if the manga doesn't explicitly spell it out, I'd say that Barrow's answer isn't all that different from the paradox of Bachira growing up by embracing the symbol of his inner child. And rather than the master striker guiding his pupils through the transition into adulthood, it's Barrow who eventually teaches Snuffy how to keep living like a shitty brat in a grown-up world. So basically, the third match of the NEL sees Bastard München facing off against a team that has completed a two-stage initiation, from pure-minded teenagers into working professionals, and from there, with an injection of childlike passion into something that is greater than the sum of its parts. And so, Isagi can only surpass the team that is most explicitly used to explore this tension between child and adult by facilitating a coming of age of his own. As young Hiori enters the field, he realizes that he's never made any proper decisions for himself. He shirked away from any responsibility and instead elected to blame his parents for his suffering and misery. In short, Hiori is a quintessential child who at this point isn't ready to enter the realm of professionals. This becomes painfully clear at a critical junction of the Ubers match, where he's faced with a fork in the road. Will he obey Ego's teachings and shoot, or follow Isagi's lead and pass? And all the while, he's haunted by the malevolent specters of his parents, who multiply the pressure he's facing tenfold. And here's the big issue for Hiori. Part of parenting involves raising your child to become an independent and responsible human being, whereas Hiori's parents micromanaged every facet of his life to the smallest detail. So now that he's for the first time ever in a position where he must make an autonomous decision with no clear answer, he finds himself paralyzed, as if he believes that the smallest of missteps will shatter the figurative pane of glass. And worse still, Hiori hasn't gained the resilience to keep going after making a mistake. One wrong shot, and he simply calls it quits. So if we think about the relation between Isagi and Hiori here, Isagi takes on the mantle of a surrogate parent. I know this might sound mad given their status as peers, but hear me out. The key about all this is the way Hiori talks about the weight of expectations throughout the match. For all his life, he's been forced to fulfill his parents' suffocating expectations. But then, Isagi personally requests that Hiori get subbed in, and in doing so, Hiori, for the first time, feels a desire to live up to someone's expectations. In short, the manga shows that having expectations placed upon you can be both debilitating and empowering, depending on the nature of the circumstances. And in this instance, Isagi succeeds where Hiori's parents have failed. Returning to the issue of autonomy, we actually witness Isagi teaching Hiori about this in real time. As they make their final charge towards the goal, Isagi stops dead on the field, waiting for Hiori to make his move. And Hiori's instinctive reaction to this is telling. He's been raised since his earliest childhood to follow the lead of others rather than taking the initiative. And that's what makes the end of the Ubers match such a great moment for Hiori's character. The reason why this duo manages to pull off the winning goal is because they trust in each other's vision and initiative. This is also why Hiori, after the match concludes, can take his first proper step towards adulthood. Isagi has opened his world by teaching him how to play autonomously, without forcing anything upon him, and as a result, the boy of glass finally makes a proper independent decision about his future. So to put it differently, it's almost as if Isagi has fulfilled the role of master striker for Hiori by guiding him from reliance on others to a place of self-determination. A major development that is consolidated by Hiori receiving his first salary, and thus welcoming him into the fold of professional football. Talking about Isagi subsuming the role of a mentor figure, the Hiori moment gets followed up 2 chapters later by a comparable interaction. This time around, it's Igarashi who is in desperate need of guidance. Now, I can't go into the details about this, but basically, throughout the NEL, we see more and more instances of Isagi usurping Ego's role as the one to set out Blue Lock's conceptual framework. He's no longer a novice needing to be instructed in the art of egotism. And that's exactly what we see in its scene with Igarashi. Isagi has reached the stage where he can pass on the teachings that he had received not too long ago. At this moment, we're witnessing Isagi's coming of age right before our eyes, at the brink of his final match in the arc. So that brings us to the ongoing PXG match, the grand climax of the NEL as a whole, and arguably of everything that the manga has been building up so far. PXG is Isagi's moment of reckoning with his 2 greatest rivals in this series, Rin Itoshi and Michael Kaiser, and as such, the arc adds more stakes than ever to its central concern of seeing if the new generation can make the transition to adulthood. But before I get to our major antagonists, I have to discuss Kaiser's loyal lackey. It's a remarkable trend that all 3 of the major NEL matches start with a flashback that introduces some of the major concerns of the match, from Yukimiya to Hiori, and finally, Alexis Ness. At a young age, Ness became enchanted by the concept of magic, and discovered that even our mundane world is permeated with magical experiences. Yet, he was born to a family of scientists who disavow anything that can't be explained by cold reason. So to put it more abstractly, Ness was forced to forsake childlike interests and act like an adult before the appropriate time, and this stunted childhood had major ramifications for him up to the present day. I've already touched on this with Yukimiya, but it's even more relevant to Ness's character. Bastard München is the theme of extreme rationality, and Noah explicitly states that he only deems those who can block out idealistic conjecture worthy of playing on the professional team. From that perspective, it's no wonder that Ness's childlike fixation on the supernatural, on the inexplicable, doesn't deliver results when trying out for such a team. Ness has essentially exchanged one hyper-rationalistic environment for another. Now, I venture that Ness's belief in the magic of football wouldn't a priori disqualify him from maturing into figurative adults. After all, the NEL continuously demonstrates that you can't make this transition without retaining the core aspect of your inner child. However, that's exactly where Ness went wrong. Following his fateful meeting with the man who defies the impossible, Ness has stopped injecting magic into the world on his own. Rather, he now believes that the one to make his vision a reality will be Kaiser, a striker who seemed to share his vision of surpassing the very shackles of reality itself. But as the entity that is Michael Kaiser gradually unravels, it becomes clear that Bastard's ace doesn't actually share Ness's beliefs. By this point of the story, Ness's childlike belief in the impossible has been exposed as a double-edged sword. He's deluded himself into serving an idealization that doesn't actually exist. And so long as Bastard's magician remains under Kaiser's spell, he'll be unable to grow up into someone who can captivate the world with his own magic. So that's a nice segue into the character I figure most of you have been waiting for. Ness's failings very much anticipate those of both main antagonists of the PXG match, in that all of them have over the course of their football career lost sight of their inner child, as their desires have been warped beyond recognition by their life experiences. And that's rather significant in the context of a match that's all about originality, or to put it a bit more clearly, about going back to your origins. Now, if I haven't yet managed to convince you that the transition from child to adult is one of the most predominant concerns of the NEL, here's what's basically the smoking gun. Wrong picture, this one here. God, at this point I can't even tell anymore how far I should go with the Isagi Kaiser parallels. Okay, in all seriousness now. As I've set out, the NEL serves as the pivotal moment of transition when figurative children are turned into professional footballers. And at its beating heart stands Isagi's conflict with a striker whose very action flows from the deep-rooted trauma of childhood abuse. More specifically, abuse from the single father who raised him. And knowing this completely recontextualizes one of the first scenes I discussed in this video. The one framing the relation between Noah and Kaiser as a father-son dynamic. And oh boy, there's a lot to unpack here. Michael Kaiser grew up with a parental figure whose life had fallen apart. A pathetic excuse of a man whose only source of self-esteem was violently lording over a mere child. And as a consequence of putting his son through years of abuse, he managed to ingrain in Kaiser the belief that he's lower than filth. A piece of shit who's not even worthy of being called a proper human being. So where all the other upcoming players that populate the NEL are adolescents who are on the cusp of becoming self-sufficient adults, Kaiser is coming from such a rock bottom place that he's struggling to even consider himself fully human. To put it bluntly, despite having secured the highest salary in the entire NEL, both Kaiser's self-image and his conduct throughout the arc completely disqualify him from becoming a functional professional. Kaiser's inability to make the jump into adulthood is clearly reflected in his persistent defiance of Noah, and in retrospect, that makes perfect sense. Seeing how his only experience with a parental figure involved perpetual torment and suffering, and that he'd do anything to escape from his childhood home, it's no surprise that he'd vehemently resist someone who positions himself as a surrogate father. That also, I think, explains Kaiser's desire to earn himself an offer that will allow him to leave BM with his head held high. Yes, it's probably a rational choice in terms of career prospects to seek out an environment where he won't stand in the shadow of the world's best striker, but I suspect that he's fueled by much more visceral emotions. Essentially, a trauma-induced aversion of being at the beck and call of this new football daddy. In this light, it's worth calling to mind Egel's observation at the start of the second selection, that some of the greatest strikers have emerged from desperate circumstances. This is Kaiser in a nutshell, of course, but Egel refers specifically to none other than Noah himself. So in a way, Noah is actually perfectly positioned to understand and guide someone like Kaiser, and that makes it all the more poignant that Kaiser tries to define Noah at every turn. As I've highlighted throughout this video, the very purpose of the Master Strikers is to usher a new generation of upcoming talents into the world of professional football. And so, Kaiser's unwillingness to heed or even coexist with a prospective mentor figure severely hampers his prospects of making it as a pro. Moreover, Kaiser's conduct towards his peers directly contrasts the role that Isagi has gradually adopted during the NEL. From the Ubers match onwards, we see that Isagi is taking leadership initiative within his team and becoming a de facto mentor figure for his peers. This is Isagi growing up before our very eyes, coming into his own upon being thrust into the world at large. Kaiser, on the other hand, has a very different picture of what it means to be an adult. Upon developing into a force to be reckoned with on the field, he takes warped pleasure in destroying the dreams and values of others. In fact, he directly acknowledges that he's transforming into his father, growing from the abused into the abuser. But what Kaiser may not yet have fully internalized is that this is not a proper coming of age at all. After all, his father is a failure of an adult who let everything he once had slip out of his hands and drove himself to ruin in the aftermath. So if that's the model that Kaiser Jr. is striving to emulate, we're meant to understand that it's only a matter of time before his own world will come crashing down as well. In short, we see in Isagi a sustainable path forward, one that's not just about improving as an individual player, but also involves taking on the mantle of his idol, whereas Kaiser's road only leads him back to the place of despair he'd so desperately fought to escape. And that's exactly what starts unfolding over the course of the PXG match. As Kaiser sees his standing on the German team, his status as its sovereign emperor crumbling apart, he becomes terrified of the prospect of losing all the wealth and glory he'd amassed over the years, and going back to the time where he wasn't even considered human. So as he reaches his lowest point in the story, the blue rose sheds all the variegated petals that adorned him, and returns to a state of zero, one where he's cast aside all his superficial desires in favour of the one thing that he truly yearned for all these years: to escape from the oppression and anguish, to be treated like a human being, and maybe, one day, for someone to love him unconditionally. Upon peeling away the facade of beauty, status and prestige, we discover that Michael Kaiser is simply a child at heart, desperately yearning for the affection that he'd always been denied. More concretely, the affection of a parent. In fact, the manga seems to be establishing a parallel between the two Next Gen 11 players it introduces in the NEL. Both Kaiser and Lorenzo grew up in the gutters of society, reduced to leading a life of crime and being treated like garbage. But then, both of them were saved by a prominent figure in the world of football. However, one of them was blessed with a loving father figure, the other abandoned inside the lion's den that is Bastard München. And it's almost as if there's a point being made about how Lorenzo grew up into a happy and fully realized person, whereas Kaiser is very much not that. And even after Kaiser's awakening and return to Zero, it's an open question whether he'll be able to find the love he seeks. As we saw in the aftermath of his goal, he instinctively trampled on the feelings of those who willingly give him the love he so deeply craves, just as he's always done. So let's put some stuff together here. Why is Kaiser the perfect antagonist for the NEL? Because this is the story arc where the Blue Locker's inevitable transition from amateurs to professionals is constantly likened to children growing into fully fledged adults. And as its dramatic centerpiece, we find a striker whose childhood trauma renders him fundamentally incapable of completing this rite of passage. The tragic paradox of Michael Kaiser is that he, more than anyone in the series, is in dire need of parental affection and other loving relationships, and yet he deprives himself of opportunities to attain this at every turn. And with such a figure as a point of contrast, the arc makes it crystal clear what's at stake for our protagonists if they fail to internalize the lessons of the NEL. That finally brings me to the last villain of the match, and it's important to note that Kaiser's and Rin's developments mirror each other in quite substantial ways. Both of them were presented with initial intentions: to erode the hearts of lesser players and to enact vengeance upon his older brother. And these intentions are almost entirely dissociated from their actual underlying desires. In Rin's case, this realization has been a two-step process. During his moment of reckoning with his older brother in the U20 match, Rin cast aside his misguided belief that he had to be understood in relation to others and emerged as his own person. Rin Itoshi, the egotistical destroyer. Yet, that still left open a further question. Where did this compulsive urge to destroy originate? That's what the PXG match sets out to answer, and in doing so, it ventures even further into his past. During Rin's early childhood, his destructive urges already manifested as a form of play. When he breaks his toys, he's like a juvenile animal whose play serves to prepare it for its full adult potential. That being, in Rin's case, to transform into the ultimate monster. The flashback then features a crucial scene with Rin's parents. His mother is driven to despair by Rin's increasingly disturbing and abnormal behaviour, but her husband manages to comfort her. Don't worry, it's just a phase, he'll surely grow out of this. There's a heavy layer of dramatic irony here, however. We readers have already been shown that Rin never lost the urge to break his toys. The toy hero that Rin shattered as a child is featured prominently in the final chapter of the U20 match, where Rin surpassing Sai is equated to him demolishing said hero as a child. And then, in his match against Bastard München, he establishes dominance over the field by proclaiming that he'll smash apart all his opponent's toys. In short, Rin's conduct in the present day proves his father utterly wrong. His younger son has never matured. Deep within, he's still that same dysfunctional child. Moreover, the idea of Rin as a child who never grew up is further reinforced through his obsession with the Evolman show. Just have a look at how Sai dismisses Rin's preoccupation. In the older siblings' view, grand battles between good and evil, hero and monster, are nothing more than childish fantasies, something that he has apparently grown out of. Sai's interests have shifted from children's TV to sports, and with that, he's taken his first step towards his future career as a professional footballer. Yet, while Sai dismisses the merits of the show, its very contents seem to corroborate his own views. So, make yourself comfortable, grab a drink or something, because I'm about to embark on a full-length analysis of the story within the story, and it'll be glorious. To put it simply, there's a certain irony in Sai's dismissal of Evolman, since its hero very clearly serves to parallel and foreshadow the prophesized hero of Japanese football himself. In fact, Evolman does the very thing that Sai is doing when he refuses to engage with the show. Presumably, Evolman acquired his name because he changes and evolves, and that is figurized on an absurdly literal level by his superpower to grow up. And if we're thinking of characters who are ready to embrace change, Sai is at the top of the list. This is proven in the backstory, of course, where he graduated from children's television to the world of football. But most notably, of course, his willingness to accept change forms the crux of the conflict between Sai and Rin. Sai has experienced the peak of the world and grown up accordingly, whereas Rin wants things to stay the same as when they were children, back when his older brother was his hero. And as the absolute clincher, don't look any further than Evolman's finishing move, the Life is Beautiful blast, an undeniable counterpart to Sai's brand of beautiful destruction. Also, if you take a more cynical view of Sai's character, it might be worth noting that Evolman can only maintain a brief stint of greatness before shrinking back to his actual size. So, all this is to say that if the battle between Evolman and the monster is a mise on abîme of sorts for the contrast between Sai and Rin, it's rather significant that the hero represents growth and change, whereas the kaiju persists in its way until it erupts into ashes. Now, as the match continues, Rin becomes increasingly haunted by his brother's spectre. Despite putting on a performance of a lifetime, it's never enough to overcome Sai's image, to satisfy the insatiable hunger for change of Blue Lock's evolving hero. So, when Rin eventually scores, it's because Isagi swatted away this phantom and allowed Rin to revert back and actualize his childhood desires in place of the ceaseless pressure to grow and change. And on that front, he sure as hell succeeded. Just have a look at Rin in the immediate aftermath of the crash and burn goal. He got himself the exact same nosebleed as from jumping off the jungle gym all those years ago. To put it simply, Rin has now perfectly reconnected with his inner child. Yet at the same time, all this makes him out as the second major character who refuses to grow up in an arc about making the transition into a new phase of life. Despite all his achievements in the NEL, Rin remains a troubled child that can't stop breaking his toys. And that's presumably why he, like Kaiser, won't be able to come out victorious against another player who at his core represents growth and change. Now, I could go on even further, since there's definitely space to bring Loki and Charles into the conversation as well. But I feel like I've gone on long enough at this stage, and besides, their story is still very much unfolding as of the time of writing. So I'm sure I'll revisit this topic somewhere down the line, but either way, I hope that I've given you a sense of why I consider the NEL the most masterfully crafted story arc in Blue Lock and among the greatest I've ever encountered. The NEL is an arc where every piece clicks together into this wonderfully coherent whole that becomes much greater than the sum of its parts. It's got brilliant writing for all of its major individual characters that then comes together in thematically tantalizing matches, which in turn serve as building blocks for the ideas of an entire 150 chapter arc. And I think that's an absolutely extraordinary achievement, really. I'm also 100% convinced that all of this will have aged even better once the arc wraps up and finally shows its hand, with some missing pieces that will bring all of this together. So anyways, this was very much a project that kept growing arms and legs every time I thought I'd gotten it under control. But I'm sure that some of you will, like always, have some great points to add to the conversation, so definitely let me know your thoughts in the comments. And if you like what you saw, consider subscribing for more in-depth Blue Lock analysis every other week. Also, if you want to support the channel even more, or just hear my thoughts on the new Blue Lock chapter every week, come join my Patreon. I'd really appreciate your support. And until then, Slán.